Hey, thank you for tuning in. This is Living 904. This is where we talk to local people, local businesses, community organizations here in the 904 and learn about them, learn about their business, learn about their industry, and so that you can understand more of what happens in our community, right? Getting engaged with our community. And I think now, with having experienced 2020, that's even more important. So, our guest today is Jackson Selvidge, and he's going to be talking to us about insurance as well as being a business owner. So Jackson, thanks for joining us.
Of course. Thanks for inviting me on. It's glad
Yeah,
to be here.
awesome. Well, so let's just start real general. How did you get started? In insurance.
Well, it's a little bit of a long story here, but essentially, graduated from FSU. I see your Seminoles ball up there, so go Noles.
Yeah, man.
Um, and was looking for some things to do. I graduated with an applied economics degree and a business minor. So just kind of trying to see where I fit in the business world, and ended up getting first into dental sales to kind of cut my teeth in the sales market. So I had
Okay.
been doing that for probably 3 years or so, 4 years, and just spinning my wheels a little bit. I was living in Jacksonville as my territory, and my sister, who's now my business partner in the insurance agency, got a job marketing for Brightway and kind of worked her way
Mhm.
up and eventually got to the point where she was the head of Brightway's marketing team.
Wow.
Um, yeah, so she was kind of mingling with the executives and everything like that in meetings and all that good stuff. But essentially, her job was training the new agency owners to be successful. How to market in effective ways where you aren't just relying on buying leads.
Yeah.
Utilizing social media, all the things that kind of go into getting business in the door when you actually open.
Yeah.
So I was playing around with the idea of getting into a different business, and she kind of started thinking about it as well. We could team up on this. You've got the sales side, I've got the marketing side of things, and started looking over the business models, and it just slowly became more and more of a reality. And we were able to make it happen and get it open. We opened about July of 2018. So we're doing it. It was
Yeah.
our parents were small business owners. My mom owns a retail store locally in Fernandina, and my stepdad is actually in the mortgage game as well. I'm sure you know, and it had always been kind of a personal goal of ours, whether we knew it or not. Growing up in a small business family.
Well, and so you weren't too scared of, I guess, taking on such a venture. I mean, you knew the realities. You grew up with the realities of what it
Yeah,
meant to be a
I
business owner.
mean, you kind of just, and anybody who starts a business knows, but I always kind of heard growing up, they're like, well, congrats on starting a business. You should make some money here after the first, 3 years or so. It's just,
Yeah.
you kind of set your expectations accordingly. And you know that going in, this is a long-term decision. It's not something that's a get rich quick or anything like that. But the big payoff in my mind is you're actually working towards something that's going to pay off for you in the end. You're not
Yeah.
putting in all this hard work to give it all to a boss or something like that. So that was the big appeal, is being able to have some freedom, being somewhat business savvy, actually being able to make your own decisions and see how that plays out for you, as opposed to just kind of taking direction.
Yeah. Yeah. When you were talking about, and that's really about marketing and kind of leveraging social media. I know in our industry, that's a big topic. And,
Yeah.
you know, the funny thing is mortgages are boring, So it's like, how do you engage with the community with that on,
Yeah.
because nobody needs a mortgage until they need a mortgage.
Sure.
So, I mean, that's interesting that even in, I guess, a partner industry, that's what you guys are working on. I mean, how do
Well,
you, how do you kind of leverage that for yourself?
honestly, you got to keep it light. My sister, who's, like I said, she's our marketing guru. I'm just kind of along for the ride. But that's the big challenge: is how do you make something as boring as insurance interesting? Because it's the
Yeah.
same thing. It goes along the same lines. Nobody really wants it. They don't really need it until they really need it.
Yeah.
But it is an important part of the market, and it's something you have to have in certain situations. So when we first started, we tried to, we both grew up in the local community. So in order to get more engagement, we didn't just focus on insurance. If we just sat there and did insurance tips every week, we would never have gotten anybody to pay attention. So we started out and tried to support local businesses with giveaways and things like that. We'd pick a restaurant or something every quarter and buy $100 gift card and say, follow us to support this local business, and we'll enter you in on the drawing. There was also a good amount of me making a fool out of myself and dressing up in costumes and things like that for different holidays. We
Yeah.
did this big Santa suit and a thing for Easter, and so
Yeah.
anything that I was willing to make some sacrifices to my
Your
dignity in
mark,
order to
yeah, your
trade it for
marketing
some.
guru is like, this is your role. I come up with the ideas. Yeah.
Exactly. And
It's a
we
team
also
effort.
tried to team up with some local people. We had a local real estate agent who did a lot of his own production work. So we did hurricane prep videos with him and things like that so that we could kind of cross promote it with our different pages and anything that we could do to help out our referral sources as well.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, 2020, obviously, it's been a interesting year for everybody.
You could
As a
say
small
that.
business
Yeah.
owner, I'm sure it's been even more so. I mean, and a lot of changes happen, in insurance. And I know Brightway, y'all do a lot of different insurance. But I
Sure.
mean, your industry, I mean, how's that been for this past year?
Well, it's a loaded one because there's been a lot of different stuff going on. I mean, obviously, 2020 hit. COVID started happening, and we kind of got together as a small business and kind of were like, okay, well, here we are. This is what we wanted, small business. So
Yeah.
let's cross our fingers that everything stays steady. So we started doing kind of alternate business plans of, okay, if we experience a big slowdown, if this turns into another 2008, for example, what are we going to do to combat that? What are we going to do to keep business coming in the door? But honestly, luckily, we live in a very desirable location, and I'm sure you've seen it on your end as well. But it kind of had the opposite effect of what people were expecting.
Yeah.
Uh, what we're seeing is a lot of people that have been located in larger metropolitan areas, in New York, Chicago, kind of you name it. They no longer are required to be close to those locations, and they might have been thinking about retiring or thinking about getting somewhere warmer once they were kind of at a point where they could. And this has kind of forced the subject where they actually can now. Most of them are working from home, or even if they were close to retirement, might have just decided to go ahead and pull the trigger on retirement with all this stuff going on. So to be honest, it has not impacted our business negatively just because there's a lot of people buying houses in our area right now, which is obviously good for both of our businesses.
Yeah.
So in a sense, it was very scary, and it still is scary in a lot of ways. But as far as business goes, we've been very fortunate in this area to be one of those places that is still a very desirable place to live. And everybody seems to be cashing out from wherever they were centralized and moving down here, not only because it's a good tax state, but because we've got warm weather and, all that stuff to go along with it. So, in that sense, it's better lucky than good, I guess.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's my mom's a local realtor as well. And, she started in '05 and then the crash happened and it was, so that was a personal too. It was like, wow, like March, April was like, is this going to be '08 all over again? And I think, honestly, I think Jacksonville, 904, Florida, as you said, very desirable. So, I know we've been fortunate more than most. So, yeah.
Yeah, and that's definitely the way I feel about it too. Is it could have gone either way. I think if there was more of an impact economically, if it would have turned out that a lot of these businesses couldn't work remotely and more people are losing jobs and things like that, it's really impacted a lot of areas. But there are some that have been sheltered from it, and a lot of those are based in those metropolitan areas, whether it's technology or banking. It's all pretty much things that people can do remote. So those are a lot of the people that we see moving down here that are just they can work anywhere now.
Yeah. Now, I mean, with insurance and I'm a ignorant to a lot of things, but any trends that you're excited about seeing or maybe coming up, things changing and, for 2021?
Well, we're the trends we're seeing aren't necessarily good trends.
Gotcha.
We're in what's referred to as a hard market right now.
Mhm.
Insurance, just like anything else, goes through these periods of uh, ups and downs, tightening of underwriting, loosening of underwriting. So for the last 10 years or so, it's been a really good insurance market in Florida, and especially Northeast Florida. It's pretty much been underpriced in the big sense of things compared to the rest of Florida. We are statistically safer for hurricanes. We don't seem to get as many of the, knocking on wood over here, direct hits. But there's a lot of outside factors that have started shaking up the insurance market. Not to get too deep into it, but
Yeah.
roofing companies have kind of exploited some of the loopholes that they've found where, you have a little storm in your neighborhood. Next thing you know, there's 10 roofers coming around, knocking on your doors, offering you free inspections.
Yeah.
And what's happening is, a lot of these things that are usually attributed to wear and tear or maintenance, whereas in the past people might have just said, yeah, my roof's old, it needs to be replaced, and kind of budgeted for it. Now they're going around saying, oh, you don't have to do that, we can get you a free roof, it's great.
Yeah.
And they're doing their job and they're trying to make money just like anyone else. But what's happening is if the insurance company tries to fight back on it, they've got these lawyers on retainer, and the lawyers have exploited the market in a sense as well, where they get fee multipliers.
Hmm.
So let's say it's a $10,000 fee for the lawyer. Now they can add a fee multiplier of 2 or 3 times, where it turns it into 30,000, where it would have been 10,000.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, and I'm sure a lot of people in this area have noticed, rates have been going up drastically.
Yeah.
Uh, and I think the big misconception is that the insurance companies are getting greedy and they're just sitting on piles of cash, and that's why you're experiencing these rate increases. And the reality is, most of them are not operating in the profit right now. Uh,
Yeah.
it's been a pretty heavy year for storms, all over the place. And what drives a lot of that is reinsurance, which not a lot of people are familiar with. But essentially, reinsurance is the big picture insurance for insurance companies. So if we
Right.
get hit with the 1,000-year storm, even if they get to the point where they're going to go bankrupt, their reinsurance policy will make sure that they can pay out all their claims. So it's required by law to have it. Everybody's got to have a certain amount compared to what's on their book of business. And what happened is the people who give reinsurance, which is only really like one spot to get it, they increased the rates 25 to 30% this year. It hasn't,
Wow.
yeah. And it has not jumped like that since '04, I believe, where we had those back-to-back storms. I'm sure everybody that lived in Florida remembered we had, 2 or 3 storms in a year. So it hasn't really increased like that since that time. And when you're already kind of getting kicked when you're down, it forces them to take these drastic rate increases just to stay in compliance. Because if they get below a certain threshold, they'll stop being recognized as financially stable, and at that point, you guys, your end won't even recognize it as legitimate insurance.
Yeah.
So the whole reason to stay in a business is to, get homeowners so that your loan can get through. So if the loan companies aren't recognizing you for financial stability, there's not really a point of even being in business. So kind of a long-winded way to say it, but the common misconception is that these rate increases are going into their pocket and that they're just loaded, or they're the bad guy trying to get one
Yeah.
over on you. But in a sense, they're trying to stay alive just like any business.
Well, and it's one of those things, just like every industry, you can see some bit of information and that's just like the tip of the iceberg. And I mean,
Of course.
there's just so much more. And, I know you've been great when we've worked together and helping educate and talk to people, explain to them the complexities of insurance. Like it's not just, it's just not this. You really setting the expectation of what that looks like, and things are changing. We all know that. We just don't know to what extent for each of us.
Yeah.
So
And what we're seeing, I mean, kind of as a result of what you'll see on the consumer side, is not just oh, my rate went up. It's the insurance companies are being forced to try to combat the roofing companies. So what's happening now is where you used to could have your roof for up to 20 years. Now they're saying, hey, we can't take anything past 10 because we just can't risk having to pay out, a $20,000 roof on a $1,500 policy when it really could last another 10 years. It's these adverse effects that people don't really get. And it's great to get a new roof if you need one. And that's obviously what insurance is for is, if you have a catastrophic event and you need help, file that claim and get that new roof. But, there is a line somewhere, a happy medium of, is that maintenance because your roof is at the end of its life, or was it caused by a storm? So they're still seeing claims coming in from Irma. I mean, 3 years later, or even more, our carriers are still having lawyers fight them saying, oh yeah, well, this was caused by that hurricane that long ago. And, what do you do? It's like, it's a tough situation for everybody.
So, I mean, if you, and it might be another loaded question, but like one common myth about your, the profession, the field, that you would want to debunk, like if you had your one.
Yeah, that is a little tough one, but I would say one myth about me first, or about being in this business, is a lot of times I feel like we take the brunt of, you raised my rate, why did you put me with this company? And it's kind of, it gets blamed on the agent. And honestly, we just have to follow the rules. There's nothing we can do to change the rate. Even if I really wanted to, there's nothing. They have to file these rates with the Office of Insurance Regulation. Any rate increase has to be approved by their board before they can even put it in place. So it's a very long process for them to change anything about it. And when they're making these changes, most of the time it's not to increase their profit. It's it's really to decrease their losses. Yeah, I mean, it's so, me as a broker, we work with a lot of different companies, and as you can imagine, we're getting a lot of calls these days about rate increases, and we just do the best we can to explain to them that, you unfortunately are not alone, and this is something that's just market wide right now, and there's not really anything that we can do as agents besides reshopping you and trying to get you a temporarily better rate. But I don't unfortunately make the rules, or I can't, enforce them or anything like that. We're distributing a product. And we do the best we can to find the best coverage for the best price for you. But the market's the market, and there's only so much we can do to control that. But regarding more just the insurance market in general, I would say one of the biggest, I don't know about myths, but misconceptions, is the sense of hurricane coverage and how it relates to flood. So I'm sure from your end, but if you are in a flood zone, or even if you're not in a flood zone, the only thing that protects you from flooding is a separate flood policy, unless you have some type of flood endorsement on a homeowner's policy, which is pretty rare. But I hear people say all the time, like, oh, I'm not in a flood zone, I don't need flood insurance, or, oh, I'm covered. If it's a hurricane and it floods, I've got hurricane coverage. But there's a really distinct line there where, one, everyone in Florida in a coastal area is technically in a flood zone. You might not be in a hazard flood zone, but it's definitely possible. I always tell people, if it can rain, it can flood. And, if there's any flood due to rising water, whether or not it's during a hurricane, that is only going to be covered by a flood policy. So that's probably the biggest thing, especially people from out of state that aren't used to being in coastal areas. And I think it kind of starts with a little bit of misinformation, probably on the front end of the sale, where someone, either the person that's selling the house, or it could be the seller, could be the realtor, anybody, like, oh, don't worry about it. I don't carry flood insurance. You're not even in a flood zone. And then that's kind of a dangerous road to go down, because about 20 to 25% or so of national flood insurance claims come from outside of hazard zones. So, ask anybody in North Carolina or Houston when they had that hurricane that dumped 50 inches of rain on them. It doesn't matter where you are. If you get hit with a major storm that just rains, the water's going somewhere, especially when you live in a place like us that's been so widely developed in the short term. We don't really have good information about all that developed land. Now that the trees aren't there and the open land's not there, where is that water going to flow if we do get hit with it? So I always offer flood insurance to all my customers for that reason, and try to make sure that they understand the distinction, because
Yeah.
it's a tough one.
It is funny because people are like, oh, the home's not in a flood zone. And I've even mentioned to them, like, well, yes, it's not in a technical flood zone, but your home is in Florida, and we're surrounded by 3 parts by water. Like,
Yeah.
there's a and then, we've got rivers and lakes and stuff. So,
Well, and
you
the
know,
government is the one that distinguishes all that. And it's a little bit of an antiquated system. There's a new flood rating system coming down the pipeline whenever they get it ready. It could be a year, it could be 10 years, who knows with them. But, Amelia Island, for example, you can have a hazard flood zone off the island, not even really near any water, but you can be on the beach and be in flood zone X, which is not a hazard flood zone.
yeah,
So you kind of look at that as like, I don't know if I really trust exactly. If I'm on the beach, I want flood insurance. I don't care
yeah,
what the zone is. It's just amazing that it's all driven off elevation, and they think, well, if you're a high enough elevation, you're out of it. When in reality, you're sitting on the ocean. So,
yeah.
just goes to show you.
Well, I think even in the mortgage industry is, when you're talking to a customer about stuff and they're wanting to talk about rates and prices, and it's like, well, a loan is, it's built on risk,
Mm-hmm.
essentially, and insurance, if anything, I mean, it's risk. And so, but that idea that people have is like, oh, there's nothing to be concerned about. Like, I'm good. So, again, you educating people and talking to them about it, it's like, be prepared, know these things and
Exactly.
giving them options. So, yeah.
Well, and I'm a free will type of guy. All I can do is give you the information, and I can give you as much as I can. And then at the end of the day, it's your house. You would have to make that decision of whether you're okay with accepting that risk. Everybody
Yeah.
has different situations. So if you're okay with it, that's absolutely your right. All I can do is give you the information, and tell you what I know about it, and let you make the decision.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, so, the other thing too is, like, as a small business owner moving forward, I mean, what's y'all's, you had some business plans, but you're getting prepared for 2021. I mean, what recommendations would you give to other business owners, starting a business and getting prepped for the next year? Every business is different, but
Sure, sure. I would say, now more than ever is the time to be active. Be active in the community, be active, like I said, on social media, be at the forefront, because, these are tough times for everybody. And these are kind of the make or break points, for a lot of businesses. So, while a lot of times it's easy to get complacent if you've owned a business for a while, or somebody who has a long history, I feel like that's what we're trying to do. Is even if our business is doing well, we're trying to do whatever we can to help out the other businesses in our local community, whether
yeah,
it's restaurants or bars or anybody who's been hit the hardest by this. We're trying to do anything we can to help them as well,
yeah,
because that's what's really going to lose the heart of our community, is all these small businesses that make up our community.
yeah,
Where I live in Amelia Island, almost all of our restaurants are privately owned. Almost all of our bars are privately owned. We don't have a lot of chain stuff. So that's what makes it a desirable location, is it's unique, and people take pride in their businesses. And it's just so tough to see what's been going on and see them hurting. So, when this first happened, I was going out, getting everything, pick up orders, whatever I could do to help out my favorite restaurants, because I don't want to see them go either. I love good
yeah,
food. I would hate to lose a good spot in our community. So that's all I can say, is just buckle down and batten the hatches, and hopefully it gets better before it
yeah.
gets, hopefully it can't get any worse. I mean, again, it's
Yeah,
2020. Let's not say anything that we can't back up. But yeah, it's just you go into, I don't want to say crisis mode, but you just try to do the best you can with what you got, and give it your all, and hope that you get the support from your community as well, that they see what you're putting in and they give you back just as much.
yeah. But then that's such a different way of thinking, I think, as well, for, just any business, of like, rather than me worrying about myself, I'm gonna worry about the others and do what I can to help them. And like you said, like, you were delivering food to people, like helping where you can. That's such a different way of thinking, and really actually saying, hey, I'm here and part of my community, and I have a business that we may not technically have sister relationships, but I
Mhm.
want to see you succeed just as much as me. So
Well, like I
kudos.
said, I mean, I come by it honestly, given that I grew up in a family that had a small business locally. So I think you get kind of a different perspective
Mhm.
when you start a business and you start realizing that there are so many people in your group that might have started a business or might have some affiliation, and I feel like you almost want to go out of your way now. It's like you
Yeah.
understand the struggle of trying to get business in the door and trying to get people to support you. So if I have any opportunity to support someone locally, especially that I have a relationship with or that I know personally, absolutely, they're going to be my first call. Because you realize how much, in a sense, that you are spending your money in places that might be going to corporate companies where you might have somebody locally that has the same product. So we try to shop small, we try to donate and things like that to local, whether it's charities or events or whatever it is. I'm part of we're part of the chamber. I'm part of a new Rotary Club that just started, the Greater Nassau Rotary Club. We just chartered a couple of weeks ago for the more Nassau County area,
Yeah.
and I'm trying to work with them as well to help out the people that are hard hit in the community. We've been doing food drives with Barnabas and all that stuff, which you can't have a successful business without a successful community, is the way I
Yeah.
kind of look at it.
That's brilliant. So any funny stories that you can tell us from the insurance world? I mean, I'm sure it's pretty casual every day.
Yeah, I mean, funny stories. We don't get as many funny stories as we get kind of tragic stories, unfortunately. Um, I guess more of an anecdote. I would say that people don't really think about. We deal almost exclusively with liability. That's kind of what our business is based around. So it kind of gives you a unique vantage. Now I go into places and I'm like, oh man, no handrail there. It's just
Yeah.
you kind of think in worst case scenarios. And a financial advisor I was talking to recently told me, the biggest way or one of the biggest ways to lose net worth is by not having proper liability, whether that be liability for your business, whether that be an umbrella policy, that if you're someone that has significant assets, that you've got extended liability in the millions just in case you do get into that car wreck or you do have that accident on your property or something like that. He said
Yeah.
that is almost the number one way, only second to divorce. So it's like, well, that's probably a
I
good
mean,
a good point there, but
yeah, I guess it's good to hear that divorce isn't the main killer. There's so
well, it's definitely up there, but
yeah.
liability is something that a lot of people just don't think about, and especially in today's days where people love buying investment properties, which is
Mhm.
great. They buy if they have extra money, they've got a condo or they've got a house that they rent out, and that provides that extra income for them. But along with that does come the liability of you're renting out your house to a tenant. You're having people come and go. If someone gets hurt or if something happens to the house and it somehow falls back on you, you want to make sure that you have liability in place to counteract that. Because let's face it, Florida, if there's one thing we're not short of, it's lawyers. I have people tell me that from out of state too. They're like, why is there so many lawyer billboards in Florida? I'm like, well,
Uh,
because they're making money.
yeah,
That's the short answer, but
it works.
it
So
works. Yeah,
yeah,
they've got a successful model here. So,
yeah,
um, but it's just we hear mostly things like that, things that are more open your eyes to what can happen and what has happened to people. One that comes to mind is a woman had a horse on her land, fenced in, private property, no trespassing signs, absolutely everything that you think you would have to do to keep yourself safe. Somebody, whether or not they were intoxicated, maybe they were, maybe they weren't, and climbed her fence at night, tried to ride her horse, got stepped on and hurt pretty bad, and she got sued and they won. And it's things like that where you're like, how is that possible? He trespassed on her land illegally and all that stuff. And it really comes down to, somebody gets injured, they've got a pretty sad story about their life now that they're injured and what they've lost. And regardless of all the things that you do to protect yourself,
yeah,
you still need that liability coverage, because you could end up in a situation like that where it's like there's not really anything else you could have done. You just ended up in a bad scenario, and here you are with X number of liability on your head for something that you feel like you really probably shouldn't have been responsible for.
Yeah.
So
It's crazy things like that, and not knowing, like you said, you think you've got everything covered and not knowing there's that safety net. So yeah,
yeah,
good
so it's
lesson
just,
to learn.
expect the worst and hope for the best in the sense of liability. Anybody who
And get a
does
good
it.
insurance policy.
Yeah, and that's why, umbrellas are something that no one really talks about. But an umbrella is essentially, it starts at about $1 million and it sits in the background. So whether it's for your auto, your home, your boat, whatever you have a liability coverage on, as long
Mhm.
as you have enough underlying liability, if something terrible ever were to happen, let's say you have a $500,000 limit on an auto policy, but you have a $2 million umbrella in the background. You get into a terrible wreck and they come after you for $1 million. After that 500 is exhausted, you're on the hook for the other 500. So that would be where an umbrella comes in, and it's kind of for a worst case scenario type thing, but not really expensive. I recommend them highly for anyone who has anything to lose, honestly, especially if
Yeah.
you're retired, limited income, which a lot of people in Florida are.
Yeah. No, great to know. All right. So you've lived here all your life, you know the area, you know your community. What to you is the best kept secret here in the 904?
Well, let me start off by saying I moved here about fourth grade. So the way that locals treat it here, I'm probably still an outsider,
Yeah, I know the feeling. I know the feeling.
But man, I'm a big. I love to cook. Me and my fiance love to cook, and we love to go explore new places to eat and cocktails. We love doing all of that. And I have to say, one thing that is like one of my favorite places where I live, I'm a big taco guy, and it's really tough to find some like true, authentic tacos. And if you haven't tried it, you should go. But La Serena on the island, on Amelia Island, is this little place that started out as more of like kind of a Spanish grocery store, which it kind of still is. There's a little part that's the grocery store, and they've got uh, the glass bottle Cokes from Mexico and
Yep.
Ecuador and all these places. So you can go in, get yourself a little something from the grocery store side, and then go sit down. And they have amazing tacos. And they're all just done. I mean, I'm assuming as authentic as it can be. I only have so
Yeah.
much experience, but some of the best tacos I've ever tasted. And
La
just,
Serena.
kind of getting the feel of being in kind of like a little family environment. You can tell that
Yeah.
it's a privately owned business. It's not a chain or anything like that. And they've just made a whole business off whipping up good tacos at the back of a little grocery store. So
I think
I kind of
you
love hole in the walls like that.
Yeah. I mean, I think some like tacos talk you either like really love tacos or you're like, oh yeah, I'll eat a taco. But like if you really love taco, you know a good taco.
Oh yeah, Carnitas is my taco. So for them, they've definitely got the best I've tasted in this area. I say it all the time. I'm like, if somebody in Northeast Florida or even like the top half of Florida could come in contact with it, I would put them up against anybody. We could do the
So I'm
Pepsi
trying to
challenge
think
all day.
because I haven't been there yet, and because I grew up on the island. So where? Because I'm now
So
that's where I have to go here now.
the old Fred's, if you know where Fred's is,
Yeah,
right
yeah,
before
yeah.
you, yeah. So it's in the old Fred's building. They
Okay,
repurposed it, but
okay,
right there near downtown.
yeah,
There's a new brewery next to it called First Love. That's also a great place to check out if you haven't been there.
okay. So then that's new there. I haven't seen that place yet. So now I got
Oh,
to
I was about to say, now
come
you
back
got me
home.
started. But
Yeah.
yeah, First Love is one of the newer ones on the island, and they have great food as well. A young couple started it. Great beers. New build out. They're putting some good stuff on there. And then also, I don't know if you know about Mokama, but Mokama is even newer, right there on 8th Street.
Okay.
New brewery. No food there yet, but man, tremendous beers. Very locally driven, and they are actually like on a distribution plan. So you could see all their stuff in the local restaurants. I'm sure you'll start to see it in Jacksonville eventually. They've got a canning line and all that good stuff. So they're working on a little bit of a bigger scale.
Awesome. That's awesome. Yeah, I mean, I've seen a lot of new signs. I've been hearing a lot, so it's great to hear that. Like, okay, things are still moving forward for them. So that's awesome to see,
They
and for the
are,
island as well.
yeah, and I'm happy to see it too. That's that's what worried me the most, is just how commercial real estate's going to do. Is this going to discourage people from starting a business just because of the fear that something else like this could pop up in the future? And, you hope that that doesn't deter people from following their dreams, because it seems like those are always the best businesses, where you're really passionate about it. So, I still encourage anybody, go for it. It's
Yeah.
worth the plunge, and, we'll do everything in the local community to support you that we can.
Awesome, man. Well, so if people want to connect with you, talk to you about insurance or your other favorite restaurants to go to, what's the best way for them to reach out?
Well, you guys, you can obviously follow us on social media. We're on Facebook and Instagram at Brightway, the Coastal Agency. You can reach us here at the office anytime. We don't have a phone tree. The phone rings directly to myself, my sister, or our other employee, Callie, who has recently joined us in the last couple of months. And that
Which I can
number,
attest to. You get them when you
yeah,
call.
yeah, exactly. Not everybody does it that way, but that's the way we want to keep it. Is, if at all possible, we never want to have you ring through to someone. That's kind of the appeal of working with a local agent, is you can call me up. You can ask me your questions, as opposed to getting somebody new every time at a
Yeah.
call center. So, but our number here at the office is 904-712-6300.
We'll put that in the show notes, as well as your tag and your handle. But
Yeah, we'd
Jackson, I
appreciate
appreciate you
that.
taking the time, man,
Of
to
course.
talk
Thanks for
about
having me.
insurance and being a
It's
business
my
owner.
it's my inaugural podcast appearance. So, you
Yeah,
got the
yeah.
first one. Feel
Hopefully
happy about
first of
that.
many, right?
Yeah, we'll see.
Well, thank you again, man. You have
Of
a good
course.
one.
You as well.
And thank you guys for listening and watching. And again, reach out to Jackson. The reason I wanted to have him on the show was because he educates and he supports. So, thanks for watching. This is Living 904.